So good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today. You're all very welcome indeed. My name is Janice Harris, and I'm the Assistant Director of Environmental Resources Policy in DARA. We develop environmental policy and legislation for Northern Ireland. My unit covers a fairly broad remit, and we look after extended producer responsibility, international waste shipments, and environmental obligations stemming from the Windsor Framework. But today we're focusing on extended producer responsibility. And just to remind you before we start that we did a couple of these webinars last year, and they can be viewed on the DARA YouTube channel, as this one will be able to be in due course also. So as you can see there from the QR code on this slide, we're using Slido today to ask questions and gather information, and we do hope that you participate in this. That would be very helpful to us. All you have to do to take part in these questions is to use the QR code by scanning it with the camera on your phone and letting it take you to the Slido website. Or you can also go to the Slido website, slido.com, and enter the code from this slide. So let me start by introducing the panelists for today. We've quite the lineup. We have Anna Louise Jelly on batteries, Stephen Clegg, waste electricals and disposable vapes, Amy Scott on packaging, Ciara Brunty on deposit return schemes and chewing gum. And we also have Aileen McChesney, Sharman Beer and Robert McLaughlin on Q&A support for us. Also, we have Lawrence McCann operating the Slido polling and feedback, and not forgetting our host for this morning, managing the slides there in the background, is Catherine O'Hara. Next slide, please, Catherine. So this is the agenda for this morning's webinar. As usual, we're covering a lot of ground today, including batteries, waste electricals and disposable vapes, packaging, deposit return schemes and chewing gum. And we also have some slots there for Q&A sessions. So please be advised that the panelist presentations will be recorded today. So due to data protection, you, the external participants, will not be recorded. And a recording of today's session will be made available on the DARA YouTube channel and on our EPR webpage following this event. Should you have a question at any point throughout the sessions, please feel free to ask it via the Q&A panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen there on WebEx. And you please direct your question to all panelists and we'll pick that up for you. So as you have a panel of policy leads here, this is a really good opportunity for you to ask relevant questions on the topics presented. So please do take that opportunity. And due to data protection, your name and your questions will only be visible to panelists. We'll try to answer all the questions during this webinar, but if there are any that we can't get to for whatever reason, then we will respond to you outside of this event. So before we move on to our first presentation, and just to warm everyone up on this cold Friday in January, we would ask your input on our first Slido question. Next slide, please, Catherine. So as I said earlier, if you scan the code there on the left-hand side, that should take you to Slido, and it should keep you, thank you very much for entering already. We're asking you here to indicate your interest in batteries. While you're answering that, I'll take the opportunity to introduce our first speaker, Anna Louise Jelly, who works in our batteries and WEEE EPR team here in DARA. There has already been a lot of communication recently around the upcoming changes in the battery sector. So Anna Louise is going to give us an update on the new EU batteries regulation and what it might mean here for businesses in Northern Ireland. So Lawrence, you've been managing the poll there for us. Hopefully you can share something about the results with us now.
Yes, Janice, it looks like the majority of the respondents are interested in buying batteries. They've got no specific links, they just buy them. And I think you'll agree it's really helpful for us to have that information. And thanks to everyone for your answers. Back to you, Janice.
Okay, thanks very much, Lawrence. That's helpful. So as I said, we're moving on to our first presentation delivered by Anna Louise Jelly. Next slide, please, Catherine.
Thanks, Janice, for that introduction. I'm Anna Louise Jelly, and as Janice has mentioned, I'm going to give you a quick update on the new EU Batteries Regulation and the Northern Ireland Batteries Trade Survey. Next slide, please. So just a few of the basics around the new EU Batteries Regulation. The regulation will begin to apply in Northern Ireland from the 18th of February this year. It will gradually introduce new rules to strengthen the sustainability of batteries and waste batteries, protect the environment and human health, and increase circularity. The new regulation differs in a number of ways from the current UK batteries legislation. Next slide, please. So some of the main elements of the new EU batteries regulation are as follows. All batteries will have a visible QR code providing key information, including composition, capacity and durability. All batteries will have a digital passport with technical details, including percentage of recycled materials used and carbon footprint. Batteries will contain minimum percentages of recycled materials according to their chemistry. There will be a mandatory carbon footprint calculation for each battery model for its entire life cycle, and there will be requirements around a due diligence policy to reduce the social and environmental risks associated with the battery life cycle. So next slide, please. So the 3 new battery categories are introduced. In total, there will be 5 battery categories, which are portable, industrial, SLI, which is starting, lighting and ignition, EV, which is electric vehicle, and LMT, which is light means of transport, with the automotive category removed. So the 2 new battery subcategories are also added. They are energy storage systems and general use portable batteries. Batteries will be labelled with the CE marking, which shows the battery's compliance with the EU regulation. The EU regulation also introduces increased targets for the recycling and collection of portable batteries, and targets for recycling efficiencies based on battery composition are introduced in 2025 and increase in 2030. So next slide, please. So this table outlines some of the main differences between the current UK legislation and the new EU batteries regulation. The current UK legislation has 3 categories of batteries, which are automotive, industrial and portable. The new EU regulation has 5, as mentioned before: portable, SLI, EV, LMT, which are the new ones, and industrial. There are also the 2 additional subcategories, energy storage system and general use portable batteries. So the current UK legislation defines a portable battery as a battery which weighs less than 4 kilograms, whilst the new EU regulation defines a portable battery as one which weighs less than 5 kilograms. The current waste portable battery collection target sits at 45%. However, under the new EU regulation, this is increased to 63% in 2027 and 73% in 2030. Currently, there are no carbon footprint requirements for manufacturing batteries. However, the new EU regulation includes various carbon footprint requirements in battery manufacturing, which will be applicable from 2025. As you may be aware, the UK is also currently reviewing batteries legislation, and whilst the EU rules don't have to be followed, some may be considered. The UK batteries consultation is expected to be published later this year. Next slide, please. So here's a brief timeline for the implementation of some of the requirements in the EU batteries regulation. So the EU batteries regulation will be applicable in Northern Ireland from the 18th of February 2024, which is next month. The 2006 Batteries Directive will officially be repealed on the 18th of August 2025. Carbon footprint measures will be gradually introduced from 2025 to 2033. These measures include carbon footprint declarations, performance classes, and maximum life cycle carbon footprint thresholds. QR codes, which give access to a battery passport, will be introduced in 2027 for LMT, EV and industrial batteries. The current portable battery collection target of 45% will increase from 2027 to 63% and then to 73% in 2030. LMT battery collection targets will be introduced in 2030 at 51%. They will then increase to 61% in 2031. Minimum percentage shares of cobalt, lithium, nickel and lead present in active materials are introduced in 2031 and increase in 2036. So there's a lot of information on that slide, but as Janice has said, this will be available as a recording afterwards. So next slide, please. So some of the main takeaways then for those businesses selling batteries or products containing batteries in Northern Ireland are that the EU rules will continue to apply in Northern Ireland. Thus, batteries being moved from Great Britain to be sold in Northern Ireland could be deemed as being placed on the market for the first time. The producer obligations could now apply to the Northern Ireland businesses selling those batteries, with the main elements being that they ensure that the batteries meet the EU requirements, they pay a fee to register as a battery producer, they comply with all producer reporting, and they contribute costs towards the waste management responsibilities. So next slide, please. So to gather as much information as possible, we really need your help. So we're collecting data through a battery survey of the Northern Ireland battery market to try and assess the potential impacts and report back to the UK government through a UK batteries consultation. So questions on the survey have been designed to gauge those potential impacts on Northern Ireland businesses. So those impacts could be around the obligations placed on retailers being categorised as battery producers, potentially impacting Northern Ireland businesses due to the cost implications. This is because a battery producer can be anyone who places a battery or appliance containing batteries on the market for the first time. So examples of these would include battery manufacturers, battery distributors, and battery retailers. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I would like to thank you for listening in. First of all, we would ask that you fill out our battery survey, and the link's included here, but it can also be accessed from the DARE website. And the survey closes on the 19th of January, which is next Friday. So responses from the survey will be used to help inform the UK government about potential impacts to businesses in Northern Ireland. We haven't had just as many responses as we would have liked so far, so we would really encourage anyone to complete the survey. We want to make sure that we have as much information as possible to understand what areas we need to focus on. So we're working through the changes with UK departments, including the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Department of Business and Trade, and the Office for Product Safety and Standards. And we will provide some updated guidance in due course. So if you're interested in further information or updates regarding the EU and UK battery policy reforms, please do contact us at the email address below. And even if you may think of something after the survey has closed, please do let us know at the email address provided. So thank you very much. Back to Janice, and next slide, please.
So thanks very much, Anna Louise. That was a really helpful presentation. There's quite a lot in there to digest. So we're just about to go into our first Q&A session. So if you'd like to ask a question on batteries, now is the time to do so via the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen by directing your question to all panelists. But before we go to Q&A, we'd be really grateful if you could answer this Slido question. Could you please indicate if your business is moving batteries from England, Scotland or Wales to be placed on the market for sale in Northern Ireland? These are batteries either on their own or included in products. And when we're talking about products, we're not just talking about consumer products, we're talking about bigger things like vehicles or heavy machinery. So Lawrence, again, you've been looking after the poll there for us, if you wouldn't mind letting us have the results. Sorry, you're on mute, Lawrence.
Apologies, Janice. Out of the 22 respondents there, the vast majority, when asked the question, does your business move batteries from GB to be placed in the market, and I said no. So I think, you know, that's very beneficial to have that information. And thanks everyone for your answers. Back to you, Janice.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thanks to everyone who answered the poll there. It's helpful then that the team will dig down into those stats there, because I can see there's a proportion that aren't sure if they do. So we'd like to think about that a bit further, I think. Anyway, next slide, please, then, Catherine. Okay, so we have Anna Louise and Aideen joining me for the Q&A on batteries. So please do direct any questions that you have to these panelists. So just before we start then, to kick us off, I do have a question for the panel. There are a lot of changes coming up from the new EU regulation. We saw a timeline there, and these start from next month. So could you please tell us, are there any changes coming in that folk need to take action on immediately? Maybe Aideen, help us.
Yep. Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. Thank you, Janice. Everybody hear me okay? Yes?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So as you mentioned, the new EU batteries regulation will start to apply from next month on the 18th of February. There won't be any day one changes, so people won't notice any difference straight away. So as shown in the timeline slide, the regulation is going to be gradually introduced over a number of years, and we're working with UK departments to understand exactly what's needed to change just to implement this legislation, and we will provide further guidance in due course.
That's great, thank you, Aideen. And I see there's a couple of questions there. Do you want to take the first one there?
Yep. There's a question just in and around the collection of used lithium-ion batteries, just asking if there's anything in the regulation in and around that just to ensure the safe disposal and minimise potential of fire risks in homes. So I don't believe there's anything specifically around that in the regulation, just around minimising the fire risks in home, but there are quite a lot of technical elements in the regulation that still have to be worked through. So it's something that could be picked up in the future, and we absolutely understand the risks to do with fire from the lithium-ion batteries, and I know OPSS and the fire service have issued guidance on this recently.
Thanks, Aideen. And there's another question there. Do you want to have a go with that?
Yep. So in the absence of a UK system, does the supply chain of batteries from GB to NI become broken? So I don't believe so. The UK system, as Anne-Louise mentioned, is due for reform as well. So they will be considering some of the elements of the EU batteries regulation, and in particular some of the placing on the market elements. And we already have a UK batteries producer responsibility system in place. So I don't think that it will become broken. There obviously are quite a few changes that we will need to work through along with UK government.
Okay, thanks very much. And then there's another couple of questions in. Anna Louise, maybe you want to take those?
Surely. So the first one there, does the 40 million threshold for economic operators just apply to the value of products that contain batteries? So obviously what we're talking about is batteries themselves or products that contain batteries. So there's going to be a lot of work done with the UK government to just drill down into exactly what the UK requirements are. And as Aideen has mentioned, the EU regulation, the timeline for implementation is actually quite long. So there's a lot of work still to be done with the EU on that. So the Office of Product Safety and Standards will be very involved in the placing on the market requirements and just drilling down into the requirements for that and the details of economic operators. So again, that will be sort of provided in our guidance that we'll be producing with the UK government.
Super, thanks, Anna Louise. Maybe move across then to Aideen for the next couple.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to keep my eye on the questions here at the same time. Will there be any additional checks on batteries at the ports? So while we're working through implementation of winter framework arrangements, we don't anticipate any additional checks on batteries in the short term, and if any additional checks are required, stakeholders will be advised of these just in advance of them being introduced.
So that's right. So there's no actual requirements in the regulation placing checks at the point of entry as there would be, say, for agri-food. So there's nothing coming from this regulation that requires that. Thank you, Aideen. Who wants to have a go at the next one then?
I will. I'm just trying to check down here. There's one in about provision in the new regs regarding second use or reuse of batteries, thinking about lithium EV batteries. There's a lot of information in the new regulation, and we're working through it, as we've said. There's a lot on sort of minimum requirements of recycled material and reuse as well. It's quite a big part of the EU regulation. So what we'll be doing is looking at all of that and looking at the requirements of the EU regulation, and working out exactly what that means for manufacturers and distributors with regards to second use, and specifically on the EV batteries.
Okay, super, thanks. And then there's one there on the new EU rules. Will it mean that they lose any obligations they incur in respect of existing UK domestic rules, or are they dual obligated? Maybe Aileen, if you could have a go at that one, please.
I'm just taking a wee minute just to understand that question a bit more.
So it means, sorry, maybe I can answer it then for you. It means will folk here that are producers have to comply with both the new EU regulation and anything that happens in the UK. But in fact, the Internal Markets Act helps us out with that one. There's a clause in it that says that if we're complying with the EU rules, then producers here can, and complying with standards in that, then products from here can be placed on the market in GB without any additional requirements being placed on them.
Thanks, Janice. I see another one just asking there, is there a plan to have a Northern Ireland compliance scheme? So this is one of the reasons that really we're asking for help and asking people to provide us with information through the battery survey. So there may be some questions they might think are quite complex, but if you would just tell us some information is better than none at all, really. We would really like to stay part of the UK compliance scheme, but we just need to understand how the batteries are moving a bit more, and we really need the information from yourselves just to be able to help us discuss that with UK government.
Thanks very much, Aileen. That's helpful to remind us about the survey again. So as far as I can see, that's all questions answered in this session. So we can leave Q&A for now, I think, and move on. Next slide, please, Catherine. So we're moving on to a presentation on waste electricals and disposable vapes. But just before we do, we're again asking for your input via Slido. Please, grateful if you would take the chance to answer this poll question. Ask if you could indicate your interest in electrical goods, waste electricals, and we'll give it a minute. And Lawrence, please share the results with us as and when they come through.
No worries at all, Janice. Just as we can see there, council seems to be winning. We've had about 18 respondents and 39%, 30-ish%. Most of our attendees are interested in it, are basically from the council. Thanks everyone for your answers, and back to you, Janice.
Thanks very much, Lawrence, that's helpful. So on to our second presentation then with Stephen Clegg. He's leading that. Stephen leads on WEEE and end-of-life vehicles, and is providing an update on the recently published consultation on waste electricals and the ongoing developments on disposable vapes. Next slide, please, Catherine.
Thanks, Janice, and thanks everyone for logging on today. I'm Stephen, the policy lead on waste electrical and electronic equipment, or WEEE as it's more commonly known. Before I take you through the consultation proposals in detail, I want to quickly set the scene for you, especially for those of you who are new to WEEE and these webinars, just to point out to you some of the complexities around WEEE products, because WEEE is different. Next slide, please, Catherine. WEEE covers such a wide variety of products, from large domestic appliances like your tumble dryers and dishwashers through to the small appliances like your phones and toys, and covers everything in between. So WEEE is different, and it's the fastest growing waste stream in the world. WEEE is often a high value item, an occasional purchase if you like. So as a consumer, we automatically treat this product at the end of its life differently to, say, an empty 2-litre milk carton, which we recycle automatically without a second thought. Just think about your smartphone as an example. Did you throw your old phone away when you purchased a new one? Or did you donate it? Or more likely, do you still have it in the dreaded drawer? Now also think about the multi-material waste. Your new phone arrived in plastic wrap packaging inside a cardboard box presumably, and inside that was the plastic handset containing a lithium-ion battery, precious metals, and of course it came with a new charging cable and plug. So did you then have two phones, two charging cables and two plugs, and on it goes. The point I'm trying to make here is with electricals, we throw them away only occasionally. We don't dump waste electrical items every day. These electrical items have a residency time in our homes of years, not days. We do expect them to last. And often there is no direct link between what we buy and what we discard. So I refer again to the empty 2-litre milk carton. You dump one, you buy one. That's not always the case with electricals. So WEEE is different, and it is a complicated multi-material waste to recycle. But the good news is it's all recyclable, including the plugs, the cables, and the batteries. So with that in mind, let's turn our attention towards the consultation, call for evidence, and the proposed reforms. Next slide, please, Catherine. Okay, so this is a UK-wide consultation and it is now open. It launched on the 20th of December and it closes on the 7th of March. The key purpose of the consultation, the call for evidence, is to seek your views and gather evidence on proposals to reform the current producer responsibility system. The intention going forward is to ensure producers of electrical equipment finance the full net cost of collection and the proper treatment of their equipment that ends up as waste. Now, this could result in a significant transfer of costs from the public purse for waste management back onto the producer. So we want your views on how we can make reuse and recycling a wee easier by expanding the existing collections infrastructure, make it more convenient for you and I to deal with our WEEE properly, minimising the amount of electricity that actually become waste in the first place. So let's look at the key proposals, or some of the key proposals anyway. Next slide, please, Catherine. Okay, we'll start with collections and measures. Across the UK, we're collecting almost 500,000 tonnes of household waste electricals every year, which is not insignificant, but we feel so much more can be achieved. Research has shown that a staggering 155,000 tonnes of WEEE is still being dumped every year in our residual black bin waste. What research has also shown, though, is that consumers will reuse and recycle when the right infrastructure and communications are in place. So what we need is an expansion of the options that's open to the consumers. And with the generational move towards more lightweight and more sustainable electronic products in mind, we feel the need to include some proposals on alternative metrics to measure the success of the new WEEE system other than simply using tonnage all the time. So we consider that whatever measures of success are actually adopted for this new reform scheme, there should be additional metrics that we can use to measure the performance of the system on a nation-by-nation basis. We want to see data and reporting at a more local level, just so we have a better picture of how the system is performing, and so we can target appropriate interventions in areas where perhaps there's maybe low levels of performance. The next one there, free of charge collection. So in short, what we're proposing here is providing householders with free of charge collections of both small and bulky WEEE financed by the producers. It's very easy to get electrical items into your home. Consider your last online, dare I say it, Amazon purchase. You can have goods delivered to your home, or if it suits you better, you can pick it up from a collection point. It's no problem. It's easy, isn't it? Just think, how would that system work in reverse when our electrical products are no longer wanted or they've become waste? We must have a robust collection infrastructure for all electrical items, big and small, as we believe these reforms are a crucial step towards a circular economy and they'll contribute towards meeting our climate action commitments. More consistent collections of separately collected WEEE for reuse and recycling will reduce the need to extract critical raw materials for new products and help reduce our carbon emissions. It is estimated that almost a quarter of electronic products that people throw away are actually suitable for reuse. That's a terrible waste. Next one, enhanced options for consumers. Well, here we propose to strengthen the obligations on retailers and provide clearer, simpler in-store take-back options for consumers. All stores selling vapes will be required to provide in-store take-back for customers buying vapes, irrespective of their turnover of vape sales. Retailers with electrical item sales of over 100,000 a year must provide a take-back service. We are aware that some retailers and internet sellers sometimes offer to take your old appliance away, but for a supplementary charge. So we aim to remove that charge away from the consumer, as this acts as a disincentive to some consumers, and that causes the unwanted item not to be properly recycled. Next slide, please, Catherine. The government proposes that online marketplaces take on the financial obligations for the collection and treatment of their overseas sellers, and this will be consistent with the current packaging reforms, if any of you are familiar with that. We further propose that internet sellers provide a free of charge collection upon delivery service of large domestic appliances such as washing machines, dishwashers, fridges, freezers, and for internet sellers with a turnover of 100,000 of electrical sales to offer take-back of unwanted equipment. Now, the intention here is basically to provide parity with the one-for-one take-back obligation that I mentioned previously that currently applies to physical retailers. Just keeps it fair. Thinking about the administration body, the key role of the WEEE scheme administrator would be to manage, on behalf of the producers, the provision of household collection services across the UK. So we're very interested in your views on whether a WEEE scheme administrator should undertake a number of key functions, such as the necessary contractual arrangements for establishing and operating the household collections, and providing centrally managed communication and PR activities aimed at householders and businesses. 3 different organisations are currently approved to operate the compliance fee, the take-back scheme and the balancing system. So the administrative burden of approving and operating each of these systems could be reduced if they were brought under a single administrator. That simplification would mean that businesses seeking to use these would in future deal with a single organisation rather than 3. That's a proposal and we'd welcome your views and comments on that. I want to touch briefly on vapes now. WEEE is currently classified into 14 categories by product type. What we're proposing is to establish a new standalone category 15 for vapes. This is to ensure the cost of collection and the cost of treatment of vapes is correctly and fairly borne by vape producers alone and not by other producers in the category. But I will talk a bit more about vapes shortly. Catherine, next slide, please. Okay, when you go on to access the consultation link, you will note we've also published a call for evidence document alongside the consultation. It's worth noting that unlike the proposals in the consultation document, which can be rolled out in the short term, the call for evidence document actually contains proposals where additional evidence is still needed before they can be further developed and implemented. There's a lack of data and a lack of knowledge on these areas, so that means that not all the WEEE reforms can be made at the same time. It's anticipated that the policy proposals on the call for evidence will be phased in over a longer time frame. This will be an interesting area, however, and we'll be discussing this in more detail in our future webinars and at our stakeholder events, so we would encourage you all to participate if you feel you can contribute in any way. So let's turn our attention now back to vapes a second. Please, Catherine, thanks. I wanted to give you a quick update on vapes, as this issue has really come to the fore over the past year and has captured everyone's attention. All type of vapes, whether they be refillable, rechargeable or disposable, they're still electrical items, so they therefore fall within scope of our WEEE regulations. That being said, our consultation proposals here on vapes complement those set out in the smoke-free generation consultation that was launched by the Department of Health back in October. That consultation proposes action that the government wants to take to tackle the alarming rise in children vaping, and even goes further by exploring ways not only to introduce restrictions on flavours and packaging, but perhaps more interestingly, also examines the very real potential of all 4 nations banning these disposable vapes altogether. So we're keeping a very close eye on developments there. That health consultation closed in early December, and there was almost 30,000 responses to it. So this will take some time, but they are currently being analysed ahead of a much anticipated government response. So if you're a vape retailer or just an interested party, we're worth keeping an eye on developments there. Next slide, Catherine. Okay, before I leave vapes, I just want to point out that while these disposable vapes do remain on our market here, they need to be managed. So I've inserted a useful NIEA regulator link and an OPSS video that provides step-by-step guidance on vape disposal for you to revisit in your own time. It's a very well-made video and a worthwhile watch. I know people had been asking about how to track down guidance. Next slide, please, Catherine. Okay, I want to conclude my talk today just with a bit of a good news story. Material Focus is an independent not-for-profit organisation that is funded by fees paid by electrical producers if they don't meet the annual recycling targets set by the government. And under their electrical recycling fund, organisations can apply to Material Focus for funding. And I'm delighted to tell you that Derry City and Strabane District Council have recently been successful with that. For their project, the team wanted to focus more on the reuse element of these items rather than the recycling only, and to focus on more rural areas of the city and district. So, for example, people who might live quite a distance away from a recycling centre, for example. Derry and Strabane have been working alongside NIRN, Northern Ireland Repair Network, and also recently with a local community interest enterprise known as Cafe Repair Foyle. They're a group of volunteers who run a series of pop-up repair cafes throughout the year. Some of you might be aware of that. They're aiming to run a series of further repair cafe events throughout the year where people will be able to bring their unwanted or broken electrical items and either leave them for repair or to kindly donate them. And there is the possibility that if the project is well received and if the donations are sufficient, there may be an option to provide startup packs for those in need of more small or useful electrical, such as kettles and toasters, for example. A really brilliant idea. So we pass our congratulations on to Derry City and Strabane District Council on that award. Really well done, and we'd encourage you all to keep an eye on their advertising for these events and get involved. Support them if you can. The reason we encourage you to support these type of ventures is because the success of those mean that Material Focus are committed to funding further projects. And it's worth noting that in spring, Material Focus will actually be opening a new round of funding. So if you haven't already, we would encourage you to sign up to the Material Focus newsletters and social media. Who knows, maybe even make a funding application of your own this year. In closing, our email address will be provided. I think it appears on the final slide today. So if you have any follow-up queries on anything you've heard, please get in touch with me. Thanks for listening, and I'll hand back to Janice now.
Next slide, Catherine. So thanks, Stephen, for that concise outline of the main proposals and the WEEE consultation, and also for the update and debates. Again, lots for folk to digest there. So we're about to go into our next Q&A session for WEEE. If you'd like to ask a question on WEEE, please do submit that via the Q&A panel on the right hand side of your screen by directing your question to all panelists. But before we go to Q&A, again, it'd be helpful if you could answer this slide question. I appreciate that you do need time to digest the consultation, obviously, but grateful for any first thoughts that you have on specific concerns for Northern Ireland. And Lawrence, whenever you're ready, if you could just provide a summary of the responses there. I see people are still typing.
Janice, so we've got a number of respondents so far, but the main thing coming through there seems to be cost. But as well as that, I can see a variety of other things such as burden to councils, funding, goods more expensive. This is great. I just say we'll take this feedback away and consider how best to use these results. Thanks to everyone who's responded, and back to you, Janice.
That's super. Thanks, Lawrence. Absolutely, we need to take this one. I can see people are still typing there, so we'll give them a wee second before we move to the next slide. Very useful indeed. Thanks very much, everyone. Next slide, please, Catherine. Okay, so this time we have Stephen and Aideen back joining me for Q&A. Please again do direct any questions that you have to all panelists through the Q&A function on WebEx. Just before then we start with any questions that we receive, again, I'll start off. There was quite a lot there on cost in the Slido that we just had. So could I ask for the new collections that were mentioned in the presentation? Is the initial thinking that councils will be expected to provide this service? Aideen, if you wouldn't mind having a go at that one.
Yes, happy to take that on, Janice. Yeah, so at this stage, it's just actually a consultation, so the proposals, nothing has been decided on them yet. So, however, we'll probably think that as producers are likely to be funding not likely, will be funding the curbside collection of WEEE. They would ultimately make the decision on how to arrange the collections, and they may decide to partner with councils, but ultimately that would be up to them to take that decision. So it won't be something that councils have to do here. So also it's not actually a decision that's going to be taken by government.
Super. Thanks very much, Irene. I see someone there doesn't have access to Slido, so they've entered something on the previous question in the chat, so we'll pick that up. No problem. Thank you for submitting that. And
Janice, sorry, Janice, cutting across you there. Just in terms of an NI context, someone has referenced there. I know I give some stats there. This is a UK-wide consultation, but WEEE is a devolved matter, so perhaps I could give some Northern Ireland context to who was looking there. 4,000 tonnes of small mixed WEEE was dumped in Northern Ireland in a year, so still quite a significant amount, with 10,000 tonnes treated at our authorised treatment facilities. So just to give some context on some of the stats there. Okay.
thank you. There's one question in. There's a couple now in. So there's one in vapes collection is one thing, recycling is another. And I'm not aware of any cost-effective recycling processes. If someone could maybe come in there on the recycling infrastructure in Northern Ireland and further afield.
Yeah, well, I did reference the recent, there has been a lot of questions on this, the OPSS guidance video that's been issued on each of the although we don't have a regulator on the call here today, unfortunately, Janice, but there is a updated guidance that has been issued on that shortly, just recently there.
Okay, thanks very much, Stephen.
It's a difficult process, we understand that.
Yeah. And there's a longish question in there on large WEEE retailers. I wonder if someone could take a look at that one too for me.
Yes, happy to take that. So going forward, can we ensure larger WEEE recyclers will be encouraged to work with local reuse initiatives? We absolutely take that comment on board, and that will be something that will be considered as we move through the consultation.
I could second that, Janice. In the call for evidence, alongside the consultation, there is actually a proposal to provide charity shops and networks of that with a free collection and disposal service. So we do want your feedback on that, on your thoughts on that, please. So that ties in very well with that question that's just been asked, please. We don't want to appear non-committal when it comes to waste electricals, but these are proposals. These are proposals at this stage.
Thank you very much. So there's nothing further in from anyone. So again, we can move on from this short Q&A session. Next slide, please, Catherine. So next up then, we're going to have a couple of presentations on packaging and the deposit return scheme. So just to lead into that one, then into packaging, we're going to ask a Slido question. So please, again, everyone, grateful if you take the chance now to answer that poll. I know it's a really big question, but grateful for your thoughts there. And whenever you're ready, Lawrence, please do go ahead and share the results.
Just give it a second, Janice, just because it takes a little bit longer than last time, but I can see that we've had a lot of people typing, and there's a lot coming to the fore. Cost is being mentioned again. Increased cost is now the big one. Increased cost is very much coming through there, and as well as cost. And I'd just like to say this feedback is really important, and especially for future engagement and policy development in this area. And thanks to everyone for responding. I'm just gonna head back to Janice there.
Yeah, no, that's super. There's a lot of words there and a lot for the team to unpack. That's absolutely great. Again, I can see there's folks still typing, so we'll just give it a second before we move on, and the team can take away and unpack that. Really helpful. Super. Thanks, everyone. Next slide, please, Catherine. So over to you, Amy, on packaging.
Thank you, Janice, and hello everybody. It's great to have you listening in today. This morning we've already heard about upcoming reforms for a couple of different waste streams, and as we come to our next one, packaging, I wanted to highlight today that extended producer responsibility, or EPR, really is the main subject of conversations happening globally in the packaging industry at the moment. Obviously, from the results of our Slido question there, I'm sure many of you are already aware of this. There seems to be a lot of interest in packaging at the moment. But just for the context of everybody attending the webinar, I'll briefly remind you of the principles of extended producer responsibility in the context of packaging. So widening producer responsibility in this space will make packaging producers significantly more responsible for the packaging they place on the market at the end of its life. EPR shifts the economic burden of packaging waste onto producers, who become required to cover the cost of convenient collection systems, transport, sorting and further processing of their materials into new high quality products and packaging again. Of all the EPR schemes currently being developed across the UK and Europe, packaging is the first to have actually commenced. And we've spoken about this scheme on our previous webinars. However, as indicated on the screen, today I'm going to provide a few updates regarding a recent programme reset, the ongoing work to design a scheme administrator, and new incoming packaging legislation for Northern Ireland. So we'll get into it with the next slide. So where have we got to so far? Well, for a reformed scheme to operate well, a detailed understanding of the packaging market was required. And the first part of our UK-wide packaging EPR scheme kicked off, therefore, in spring 2023, when new laws were made introducing requirements on producers to report and collect data. These new requirements mean that, firstly, packaging producers have to report amounts and types of packaging that they've placed on the market for the purposes of calculating their recycling obligations and the EPR fees that they will have to pay in the future. And secondly, they require producers to report further details on their packaging to inform the assessment of its recyclability. So of course, at this stage, everyone who's obligated should now be aware of what they need to do to comply with the new laws. But as a refresher, I've included this helpful table on the slide, which lays out the obligation for different sizes of producer according to turnover and packaging tonnage. So just to briefly talk through it, producers of packaging will need to report data if their organisation, whether an individual, business, subsidiary or group, fits into one of the green boxes. That is to say that it has an annual turnover of £1 million or more and or is responsible for over 25 tonnes of packaging in a calendar year. The green box, the dark green box, sorry, as you can see, is applicable to large producers who will need to report data twice a year as well as paying EPR fees. And the lighter green boxes are applicable to those classed as small producers who will only be required to report data once a year. All of this reporting can now be done through the new digital system RPD, standing for Report Packaging Data, and the information will be received by the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, the regulator in this case. And if you sit in one of the white boxes on the table, you're not obligated to report packaging data, just to confirm that. So regarding all of this, on the 7th of February last year, 2023, we held a technical webinar for packaging producers in Northern Ireland to go into the detail of what needs collected and what needs reported. And if this is all relevant to you and you'd like to listen to that again or hear some more, you can find the recording on the Dairy YouTube channel. But full guidance is also available for anybody to read at the gov.uk webpage linked on the slide here. So next slide, please. Thank you. So although data collection and reporting has begun, the requirement on producers to pay EPR fees will not come into place until October 2025. This date differs slightly from what was shared at our last DARE webinar in February 2023, as the original ambitious target date for EPR payments to come into place was October 2024. But a decision was taken last July to defer the introduction of EPR fees by 12 months. And this decision was taken jointly across Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales. This revised timeline has since provided all parties, namely the packaging industry, local authorities and waste management companies, with a little bit more time to prepare to ensure the success of the scheme in its delivery on long-term recycling goals. Furthermore, the four nation governments have been using the additional year to conduct what's known or been dubbed as a programme reset. And at the heart of this programme reset has been a desire to work even more closely with key stakeholders on the design of the scheme. Following the deferral announcement, this meant that we put out a UK-wide consultation on the draft EPR regulations, seeking views on how to make the proposed obligations workable for all within the bounds of obviously the agreed policy positions. Further collaboration has since been ongoing in the following areas. Firstly, on the scheme administrator. The design and functions of a scheme administrator were considered at recent stakeholder workshops held throughout late 2023, and I'll come on to those in a later part of my presentation today. And the second area of working together has included on other aspects of EPR, such as the modulation of fees and labelling requirements. Following initial work done on these last year, including drop-in sessions at London Packaging Week, the DEFRA teams and policy colleagues from all of the devolved governments will be working with industry experts in the coming months to determine how to set material categories and fees for when modulation based on recyclability is due to come in, which is at this stage, year 2 of the scheme. So as mentioned, the requirement for large producers to start paying fees for the costs of collecting packaging from households and street bins is deferred until the financial year 2025-26, with local authority payments deferred as a result. In the meantime, I need to highlight today that it's important that producer responsibilities under the current 2007 packaging waste regulations remain the same. And in 2024, the cost of recycling still needs to be covered by the purchase of packaging recovery notes, or PRNs. This system, the PRN system, is likely to remain in place for at least 5 years, even after EPR is introduced, so keep an eye on obligations under that. On the timeline on the slide here, you'll also see that the annual producer recycling targets have been updated for 2024. The department had to take through a new statutory rule in Northern Ireland to amend the targets for this year due to the delay, but future targets will be set out in EPR legislation. So hopefully that's a whistle-stop tour of the changes following the deferral, and I'll get into some more of the detail on the next slides. Thanks, Catherine. Perfect. So this is just to say that regarding the consultation mentioned that was held on the draft main extended producer responsibility regulations. We wanted to say thank you to everybody who was engaged in the online learning sessions and who responded to the consultation. Of course, rather than to change any agreed policy positions, the purpose of this was to test how clear the obligations were and to test their operability with those who will be using them day to day. And there was a really good response rate from Northern Ireland and across the UK, and all the comments received have challenged our teams to consider how we might amend the draft to bring in more workable obligations on producers, local authorities and those involved in the wider value chain. And with these changes considered, an updated draft is now going through internal review and approval processes, and we really do hope to publish a response to the consultation soon in early 2024. Next slide, please. So there's been a bit of a mention of the scheme administrator, and this body will host many of the day-to-day functions of the scheme once it is up and running. With how significant its roles and responsibilities will be, we are spending a lot of time designing the scheme administrator's governance and the framework for it, really. So I'm just talking through on this slide really where we're at with the design work. All four nations have been working with industry and stakeholders, including councils, and there's been a huge amount done this past year, and I'm sure several people on this call have been closely involved, so just a special thanks again for your contribution in this way. As you can see in the bottom left-hand side of the slide, The design principles for this work mean that we're working within agreed policy set out in the 2021 government response to the EPR consultation, taking forward this work with a focus on international best practice and involvement of the whole value chain, whilst the scheme administrator still needs to retain some of its necessary sovereign functions as well. And of course, working to this initial operational timeline of October 2025. To carry out this work, there have been two sets of sprints. One visioning sprint held at the beginning of 2023, which led to the reset and re-evaluation of the programme. And we're just coming to an end of a second set, which involved key stakeholders from all 4 nations attending 4 workshops towards the end of 2023. And I think these workshops specifically looked at what the value chain could lead itself as an outsource potentially in future iterations of the scheme as well. So a bit of looking ahead there. But in this whole process, one barrier we have faced is that the scheme administrator won't have legal entity until the main EPR statutory instrument is in place at the end of this year. So in the meantime, we have built an interim body known as the Scheme Administrator Steering Group. And this interim body will meet for the first time in the next few weeks. The plan is that this will exist for 12 months, helping to ensure sector-led governance of the establishment process. And the group does involve a really good spread of people from all areas. If you look at the green button on the slide, you can see who's contributing to that. And there's 4 nation representation, of course, Northern Ireland included. In parallel to this setup work, recruitment for the actual scheme administrator is well underway with the recent appointment of the head making packaging news outlets this week. If you are interested in more, the Resources and Waste newsletters published by DEFRA on behalf of the 4 nations will keep everybody updated on further progress with this and any opportunities that you might be able to get involved in if they arise in the future. Thank you. Next slide, please, Catherine. So for those interested, we've just included a bit of the relevant legislation, a bit of a roundup of everything that I've touched on so far today. As previously discussed, new data reporting regulations were made last year, and we do expect in 2024 a further amendment to come forward for that as well. I've also referred to a recent amendment to the 2007 producer responsibility obligations here. This piece of legislation places recycling targets on producers in Northern Ireland in relation to glass, plastic, aluminium, steel, paperboard and wood. And the amendment has just brought in more targets for 2024 to keep those up to date. So just looking to the months ahead then, we are planning to work to develop materials facilities regulations in order to bring Northern Ireland into alignment with the rest of the UK and its requirements on operators to sample waste and record and report information to the environmental regulator. And of course, last but not least, the big one coming up in 2024 is the producer responsibility obligations, packaging and packaging waste regulations, more commonly known as the main EPR regulations, which will be a UK-wide piece that brings in all the remaining requirements on packaging producers to allow EPR to operate in full. So next slide, thank you. Another key piece of legislation we do want to raise today before I draw to a close is the proposed EU packaging and packaging waste regulation, which is set to replace an existing EU directive. The EU directive for packaging and packaging waste is listed in Annex 2 of the Northern Ireland Protocol and more recently the Windsor Framework. As such, it directly applies in Northern Ireland. Any replacement to this directive, such as this EU packaging and packaging waste regulation, will therefore also apply in Northern Ireland. Just to cover what it currently looks like in its draft state is it includes provisions on mandatory recycling targets, mandatory reuse and refill targets, new reporting and labelling obligations, and mandatory deposit return schemes for drinks containers. The main objectives of this regulation are firstly to prevent the generation of packaging waste, reducing it in its quantity, restricting unnecessary packaging and promoting reusable and refillable solutions. Secondly, to boost high quality closed loop recycling, such as bottle to bottle recycling in a deposit return scheme. And finally, another objective of it is to reduce the need for primary natural resources and create and establish a well-functioning market for secondary raw materials. The purpose of me mentioning this today really is to assure you that we're working closely with colleagues throughout the UK and the EU to ensure that the incoming EU regulation is fully considered for Northern Ireland, particularly in the context of the UK-wide packaging EPR reforms as well, and tying in with those. So just in closing my presentation, to summarise, extended producer responsibility here will mean that producers become more economically responsible for efficient and effective management and disposal of packaging waste materials. As we've heard today, a wide range of stakeholders have been key in the ongoing design of this scheme. But of course, as well, individual participation also plays an important role in supporting the rollout of packaging EPR. So whether you're listening today for your line of business or not, we're all consumers at an individual level with a responsibility to reduce waste and recycle properly where we can. So just want to thank you all very much for listening today. We welcome your continued engagement and we'd encourage it. And yeah, I'll just hand back over to Janice for our next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amy. That was super helpful. A really major reform programme there, but also for the little slide you did on the end on the EU regulation. So reflecting on Amy's final slide, we have another Slido question. We'd really appreciate your first thoughts on any concerns you've received for Northern Ireland with the introduction of the new EU packaging and packaging waste regulation. And again, Lawrence, just over to you for comments whenever you're ready. I see people are
Thanks, Janice. I can see people are feverishly typing away as we speak. The big one coming through there seems to be divergence, but as well as that, confusion is coming in quite well. So is more paperwork. Just while people are typing away, just to let everyone know, thanks for letting us know these potential issues. They're going to be very beneficial to our engagement and policy development going forward. I can see even more of that are coming, Janice, such as too restrictive producers, more paperwork, for example. I'll just head back to you, Janice, just to let some of the last people complete.
Yeah, that's super, Lawrence. I think across policy areas that still deal with the EU regulation, those are very common themes on confusion, diversion, cost of administration. So that's super. Again, we'll take that away and develop that. Thank you. So next in today's lineup, we have Ciara Bronte, who works primarily on deposit return scheme. Ciara will share the latest on another large project, the deposit return scheme for drinks containers, and she'll also provide a quick update on the work of the chewing gum task force. So over to you. Next slide, please, Catherine. Oh, you're on mute, Ciara.
Apologies, Janice. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. As Janice has said, my name is Ciara Bronte. I am part of the DRS team here at DAERA. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to attend today, as well as those who may have attended our previous webinars. For those who are interested, links to our previous webinar recordings in which we set out the detail of how DRS will work can be found on DAERA's Extended Producer Responsibility webpage. Today, I will be giving an update on all the work we have been doing with industry and stakeholders across the UK in 2023, and I'll also include a slide on the progress of DRS in Ireland, which is due to go live shortly. Speaking of which, some reverse vending machines, or RVMs, are currently being deployed already in Ireland, such as the one shown here on the slide in Aldi in Ballybuffet. Those of you in Ireland will start to see more of these in the coming weeks, so do keep your eyes peeled. Also, for anyone that attended the Balmoral show in 2023, they may recall seeing an RVM in action at our stall, as is pictured here. This was just one of our many engagement events throughout 2023. Next slide, please, Catherine. Thanks. So the deposit return scheme, how will it work? For those who may be attending today for the first time, I will give a brief outline of what a deposit return scheme, or DRS, is. It is a money-back system that reduces litter and increases quality and quantity of recycling. A small deposit is paid by the consumer at the point of purchase of an in-scope beverage container. When the consumer then returns the empty container, they receive their deposit back. DRS will be a return to retail model, and return points will be paid a handling fee per container. In other schemes, we have seen voluntary return points set up as a mean to generate revenue, and we hope to see similar results with DRS in the UK as it becomes operational. Deposit return schemes are tried and tested and are being used around the world to achieve high recycling rates, such as 96% in Germany. Most recently, however, Hungary introduced their deposit return scheme on the 1st of January this year. So this means that there are now 15 countries within the EU with an operating deposit return scheme. Many more nations are introducing DRS to meet higher recycling targets and move towards closed-loop recycling. This will result in segregated material of high quality, delivering bottle-to-bottle and can-to-can recycling, which our current curbside collections don't achieve. Next slide, please, Catherine. So, about DRS in the UK. There have been 2 consultations on DRS in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. First in 2019 and again then in 2021. The 2021 consultation received 2,590 total responses, of which 83% respondents expressed support for DRS. The government response was published in January 2023 and can be found on the DERA DRS webpage. This set out what the scheme would include and how it would operate, subject to further work with industry to define aspects, which we have been doing throughout 2023. A deposit return scheme is a producer responsibility scheme designed for a very specific material stream. For Northern Ireland, this is for single-use drinks containers made from PET plastic, steel and aluminium. Implementing a deposit return scheme is a joint policy programme across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. There is one piece of legislation for England and Northern Ireland and a separate but parallel piece for Wales. Scotland have developed a separate scheme along with their own legislation, but all 4 UK nations are working closely together to deliver a DRS which is due to go live on the 1st of October 2025. So some key policy updates for you today include: all 4 nations are continuing to work on return point obligations following input from the retailer subgroup. We will provide an update on this once a position has been agreed. A consultation of price marking was undertaken by the Department of Business and Trade, and discussions have taken place with the Department for the Economy on this also. A stakeholder consultation has taken place in December 2022 on amendments to permitted development rights for the installation of reverse vending machines. The Department for Infrastructure have published the response to this, which can be found on their website. Officials are exploring possible amendments to the waste regulations for DRS regarding carriers, exemptions, tracking and permitting. Next slide, please, Catherine. So on industry engagement then, there has been extensive industry engagement on the draft regulations between February and May of 2023. This has been very positive, with over 50 stakeholders from different parts of industry having had access to 2 versions of the draft regulations. Since summer 2023, industry engagement is now being approached on a 4-nation basis. The 4-nation engagement approach consists of the DRS Industry Forum, which is supported by focus subgroups with relevant industry sectors, which are retailers, hospitality and small and large producers. Bilateral meetings with key stakeholders are also held throughout the year, along with ongoing engagement in already existing forums. Previous key engagement has included an industry workshop, which was held in August 2023 to test positions prior to issuing final policy proposals to the Ministers or Perm-Sec of each nation. Some upcoming key engagement events include the next DRS Industry Forum, which is currently scheduled for later this month on the 23rd of January. In Northern Ireland, we have held some additional engagement events with key NI stakeholders, such as Northern Ireland Food and Drink Association, Retail NI, Hospitality Ulster and local councils. Engagement with Ireland has also been ongoing and has included meetings with our counterparts in Irish Government, Return, who are the scheme administrator for DRS in Ireland, the Irish Beverage Council, which is a trade association for drinks producers on the island of Ireland, and other stakeholders who operate on an all-island basis. This has all been very helpful in sharing lessons learned from setting up the Irish scheme. Next slide, please, Catherine. Thank you. So, making DRS work across the UK. Since the summer of 2023, officials from all 4 UK nations have worked closely to identify an approach to make sure that DRSs across the UK work together. Final policy proposals are now being considered by ministers and officials in each nation. Some topics under consideration include minimum container size, deposit level, registration and reporting requirements, reciprocal returns across the UK, labelling requirements, and return point and retailer obligations. We will, of course, also continue to work across the 4 nations to support the successful delivery of DRS throughout the UK. Next slide, please, Catherine. Okay, on then to a DMO update. A Deposit Management Organisation, or DMO, will be appointed to manage the overall operation and logistics of the deposit return scheme. DRS will be an industry-led scheme, and the DMO will be an independent, not-for-profit private organisation. Its membership will be made up of individual companies or trade associations which are representative of the drinks industry. There will be 3 legally separate schemes across the UK, which are England and NI, Wales and Scotland, but it is hoped that the same DMO could be the administrator for all 3 schemes. The next step to be taken in the DMO appointment process are as follows. As the DMO will be representative of many organisations at the DRS Industry Forum and its subgroups, we plan to use these groups to explore key aspects of the DMO's responsibility. Intelligence gathered in this way can inform the future discussions with the DMO candidate and on the DMO application process. Industry must take the next step in presenting a DMO candidate with whom government can begin detailed DMO-related engagement with, and we are happy to support these conversations between industry where necessary. We are progressing with the drafting of the core application documentation and guidance, which will be developed further once the DMO applicant is identified. We are also very aware of how the island of Ireland operates for the drinks industry, and we are eager that the DMO appointment process fully considers this. Our regulations will allow for collaboration between the 2 schemes. Next slide, please, Catherine. So this brings me on to an update for the DRS in Ireland. Ireland's deposit return scheme is due to go live on 1st of February this year. Their scheme is owned, led, funded and operated by the beverage industry that are placing their products on the Irish market. Return is the scheme administrator, and information on Ireland's DRS, including producer, retailer and registration requirements, can be found at their website, return.ie. Anyone attending today that may have obligations under Ireland's DRS can visit the site to ensure they are prepared for the scheme's implementation next month. As previously mentioned, DRS officials have had extensive engagement with Irish officials and stakeholders in relation to DRS. This has included meetings along with DEFRA colleagues, with Irish Government and Return in Dublin to learn lessons regarding their upcoming DRS, and in September of 2023, a 4-nation presentation was given to the Irish Beverage Council on DRS across the UK. This engagement has allowed us to align the schemes where possible and aim to prevent unintended consequences. There are several areas of alignment between the UK DRS and Ireland's DRS, including the scope of materials included, which again are PET plastic, steel and aluminium cans. Despite this, it is inevitable that there will be some divergence between both schemes, as they are in 2 different jurisdictions with 2 different currencies. The schemes will have separate labelling to identify in-scope items to prevent fraud between the 2 schemes, and there may also be divergence on other aspects such as producer registration and retailer exemption. Next slide, please, Catherine. So just finishing up on DRS, the next steps are as follows. Firstly, DRS is currently due to go live in October 2025. Our immediate priorities are: we will continue with the 4-nation engagement approach as outlined previously. We are finalising the drafting of the regulations, which will include further work with industry, and we aim to have the main DRS regulations made by late 2024. We will have ongoing engagement with the industry to develop the DMO application, as well as designing the assessment and approval process. We will also work with industry to identify a suitable applicant. Next slide, please, Catherine. Thank you. So moving on then from DRS, which was a mandated producer responsibility scheme, to an update on a voluntary producer responsibility scheme, in this case for chewing gum litter. As we all know, I'm sure, chewing gum litter is a blight on our towns and cities. So a chewing gum task force was established in 2021 and is administered by the charity Keep Britain Tidy. The task force brings together some of the UK's major chewing gum producers, including Mars Wrigley and Perfetti Van Mel, who, on a purely voluntary basis and not mandated by government in any way, will invest £10 million over 5 years by funding local councils to help reduce and remove chewing gum pollution. 10% of that available funding could be allocated to NI councils to fund the cleansing and prevention of gum litter on our streets. In 2022, which was year one of the scheme, a total of over £1 million in cleansing grants was paid to councils across the UK. This funding could be used by councils to purchase specialised gum removal equipment or hire dedicated staff to remove gum stains. The report for year one of the task force can be found online at keepbritaintidy.org. In year two, in 2023, all 6 Northern Ireland councils that applied received chewing gum task force clean-up grants, totalling nearly £128,000. The councils were Mid and East Antrim, Antrim and Newton Abbey, Fermanagh and Omagh, Derry and Strabane, Causeway, Coast and Glens and Mid-Ulster. The scheme was very successful, and monitoring carried out in one area of Northern Ireland last year after the grants were paid showed a 42% reduction in gum litter in that area. The full report for year two will be published on the 5th of February 2024, so thank you to all those councils who took part this year. Next slide, please, Catherine. So it's now entering its 3rd year and the scheme has grants of up to £25,000 available to councils. As councils will be aware from recent correspondence, applications will open on Monday the 5th of February and close on Thursday the 28th of March. A webinar for councils interested in applying for a grant will be hosted by Keep Britain Tidy in February, so please see their website for more details on this. Councils that are not in receipt of a grant can also benefit from the Chewing Gum Task Force by availing of their free Gum Litter Prevention Toolkit, which includes bespoke targeted signage as well as guidance on where and how to implement it, all completely free of charge. This can be found online at tacklegumlittering.co.uk. That's all from me. Thank you all for listening today. I will now pass back to Janice. Goodbye.
Super. Thanks very much, Ciara. A really helpful roundup there of those big developments for DRS and gum. So we're about to go into our very last Q&A session on packaging and DRS. So now is the time to ask your questions via the Q&A panel by directing your questions to all panelists. Also, if you have additional questions coming from the earlier sessions on WEEE and batteries, please do feel free to enter those too, and we can bring in earlier panel members as well. But before we go to Q&A, be grateful if you could answer the Slido question. I can see that you've done that. So Lawrence, please do go ahead and sum up responses.
Thanks, Janice. Based on the feedback there, that's pretty good. 100% of people there have said that they'd like to see more gum litter signage in their area. As I stated before, this information is very helpful, and I'd like to thank everyone who's responded. We'll take that away. Back to you, Janice.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. It's not often you get 100% response to anything, so thank you. Okay, so last Q&A session. So this time we have Charmaine, Robert and Amy join me for packaging and DRS. Please do direct your questions to all panelists on the Q&A function. And can I ask our earlier panelists to also join us if they've received questions in relation to their work areas? Okay, so again, I'll have a quick question to start us off. So perhaps Charmaine, then could you please tell me what the correct collection rate is that we're aiming for when we introduce DRS here?
Yes, certainly, Janice. So the overall aim is that we reach 90% within 3 years of the scheme, and that target will be phased up over the first 3 years of DRS. So 90% is the goal.
Super, thanks very much, Charmaine. And maybe staying with you then, if you could take us through the questions that were assigned to you.
Yeah, there's a very easy one to start with. Somebody who arrived late wants to know if the webinar will be available later. Yes, it will be available on our YouTube channel for anyone who wants to watch this later on, and most people should be sent the link. I'll take a question here. Sorry, they're coming in. quite quickly. I'll take a question here on how much funding for chewing gum cleanup is being provided by Mars. To ensure level playing field, there must be chewing gum EPR, otherwise you're unfairly targeting packaging. Yeah, I don't have the specific figures for what the different chewing gum producers are putting into that fund. But as Kira outlined, it's a voluntary scheme at this stage, and we're quite pleased with how that's progressing at this time. With another one here, apologies, I'm just scrolling through. Yes, about the packaging regulation that's being progressed by the European Union. Is there a risk that Northern Ireland will be subject to different packaging EPR requirements to GB, adding further complexity to an already complex scheme? Yes, thank you for that question. The regulation from the European Union isn't finalised yet, so we're watching it very closely. There is, of course, a potential for divergence. And at the minute, Northern Ireland has stayed on track with the rest of the UK on EPR and many other things. So we're hopeful that any impacts would be minimal, but that's why we're seeking more input and watching that closely. So thank you for that question. There's probably a couple more on DRS if you want to go to Robert, and I'll pick some other ones up.
Okay, thank you, Robert, if you wouldn't mind coming in then.
Yeah, thanks, Janice, and thanks everyone for attending. A few questions in here on DRS. One on how might financial implications on current service providers and collection, sorting, and recycling be abated if producer-owned reverse vending machines, sorry, it's moving, DRS system put in place. DRS will capture high-value material, decreasing collection household tonnages of PET. The private sector recycling has been solving this for years for producers, investing heavily into how to do so. Is there a question of fairness here? So I think with moving towards a circular economy, there's always going to be a reduction of material within the waste stream, and that's what we're aiming to achieve: less waste and more reuse and recycling. The curbside collections will lighten the load, which again will lower the gate fee for councils and waste providers. But I think the other thing that we need to look at this from a positive perspective is DRS will provide opportunities and has shown to provide opportunities in the waste sector for individuals and companies to adapt and to embrace the situation going forward. There's another question in here as well, saying October 25 is no longer feasible. It was described as an ambitious target when the scheme was launched. While excellent work has been done, it was anticipated that the regs would be ready some months ago. The slippage of the original timescale, our timeline at a minimum of 6 months, probably closer to a year. No fault of Dara in this regard, but we're getting to a stage where the reset is necessary. So I think Ciara had mentioned, obviously, from May this year, we have looked at a lot of aspects of DRS, and we've done heavy engagement from the start of 2023, looking at various aspects of DRS and how it can work, and engaging with those specialist sectors within retail, with producers, etc., to drill down into the fine detail of how this scheme will work. Ciara set out within her presentation a number of aspects that the nations are working together to try and resolve, and you know, at the moment we have taken that into consideration with regards to, and the timelines based within that, and we have put recommendations and advice to ministers and PRMSECs in each nation, which is currently being considered, which we hope to make an announcement on all those aspects in the coming months. So hopefully that provides a wee bit of detail on that. Just scrolling up. How do NI producers selling product to Ireland get their QR code and logo for the label? So obviously, this is a scheme that will be managed by Return, who's a scheme administrator in Ireland. So this is something that they're haven't had any input with, but obviously we have had conversations, and we're aware that currently, to place product on the market in Ireland, you must have an address in Ireland to register with the scheme as a direct producer, or you must use a a distributor or the seller in Ireland must register on your behalf. So that's how the two products to register directly from Northern Ireland, that isn't possible if you don't have an address in Ireland itself. So, but do be aware, officials have been liaising with Return on this to try and alleviate the problem, been discussing with Irish government, and we have made sure that within our own regulations that there isn't similar barriers for producers placing on the market in Northern Ireland. I'll maybe hand back to you, Charmaine, for a few other questions.
I think Amy has a couple there. If you want to go ahead, Amy, back to packaging. Questions are still coming in there, so
yeah, there's plenty, but yeah, I'll go back to packaging for now. So the first one that I've been looking at is asking for reporting packaging waste information in 2024. For 2023 reporting year, do we use the same platform we've used before, or do we use a new platform? And I think I did refer to it in the side. There'll be a new digital platform to report data on. It's called Report Packaging Data. There are a lot of pieces of information and guidance on the gov.uk web pages if you need to find out more, but you're also very welcome to send us an email whenever you see our final slide today, and I can direct you to someone in the Environment Agency, Northern Ireland Environment Agency, to help you work your way through that and find it and figure out how to register. So yes, keep in mind it is a new platform. And then the next question I'll take is, do you still intend to introduce the mandatory take-back of paper cups in 2025? If so, would Northern Ireland be able to remove the de minimis so all sellers of beverages in paper cups take part? So this isn't something I've mentioned today, but we have in previous webinars, and as it currently stands, yes, the policy hasn't changed from what's been set out, and government plan to introduce a mandatory take-back scheme for cups in 2025. In light of the changes to the timeline for EPR, we took time just before Christmas there to engage directly with stakeholders affected by the obligations. However, on the back of that, we don't intend for the substance of the legal obligations to change significantly. And there is no plan to change the de minimis specifically for Northern Ireland or other nations. There will be the same obligations in all 4 nations. So hopefully that answers the question on cups. And then another question through asks, is there a date as to when we will know material costs for EPR? This is something that's essential for business planning, and we're very aware of that, and I can't give you a specific date right now, but we do aim to offer packaging producers a side of illustrative base fees, which are the fees for year 1 in EPR, in early 2024. We're planning to align this with some upcoming engagement on fee modulation, and we expect to introduce fee modulation from 2026. Early estimates are, of course, necessary to enable producers to have as much time to understand what materials are likely to be modulated upwards and maybe be more expensive, and which materials will be encouraged under the system. So please keep an eye out for invitations to workshops on modulated fees, and with those invitations, we do hope to share some illustrative base fees with you as well.
Thanks very much, Amy. There's one comment in from someone there on the scheme administrator, so it's just to advise you, in case you're not aware, that DEFRA did recently appoint the new head of the scheme administrator for packaging, and that's Margaret Bates. Margaret currently works at OPRL, the labelling company. So looking forward to working closely with Margaret on the scheme administrator functions. Okay, we're nearly out of time, but Robert, perhaps you could, there's a few questions there on digital DRS, so really grateful if you could maybe cover that one or those questions for us.
Yeah, no problem, Janice. And it's great to see lots of interest on DRS as usual. So yeah, digital DRS, the question's been asked, have we considered it? We definitely have, and most of you will be aware that the communication that we've given legislation will allow for technology advancement, but it will be for the DMO to determine the best way to achieve the quality of recyclate returned, but also the quantity, so making sure it meets it. So legislation will be open to digital DRS if that's what the DMO sees best fit. We have seen a number of trials, one in Whitehead, a number of Wales throughout 2023. And I think it's important to note that we do see the advantages, but with regards to technology, it's still at the very early stages. And within the technology of digital DRS, it requires individual barcodes on each container, and that technology hasn't been developed to be produced on a mass scale. And that's the feedback we're getting from the technology producers. So we are keeping a very, very close eye on it. We see the benefits of it, but again, we see this is a role for the DMO that's going to be appointed and industry to determine the best way to achieve these targets, to achieve the quality and quantity that they need back in, and return to retail is a proven method to do that, and that's how we're proceeding at the moment, and that's the model that we're proceeding with at the moment. But again, legislation does provide the ability for technology to be adopted going forward. So yeah, hopefully that covers that one off, Janice.
That's super. Thanks very much, Robert. And I guess we'll just squeeze in, there's a question there on importing, Charmaine. I wonder if you could just cover that one off very quickly for us, and then I'm afraid we'll have to close.
Yeah, there's a question there on movement of packaging from the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland. Yes, that would be an import and would therefore have obligations in the Northern Ireland EPR scheme. There's also another comment there about north-south, south-north trade, which Robert was talking about as a response to what Robert had said there. And yes, we're doing all we can to ease any burdens for trade across the border, as we know it's a very important issue for all our businesses. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Charmaine. So thanks everyone. You rattled through a lot of questions. I'm not quite sure that we got them all, so we maybe have to take some away and answer outside of this. Thanks. That was the final Q&A today, and Catherine's already moved us on to the next slide. Thank you, Catherine. So just one last slide, and we'd really like to know what you'd like to hear about next time around. Also great if you could let us know what was today helpful to you, so that we can make sure that we're being relevant for you. See folk typing in there, Lawrence, but just please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Sure, no worries at all, Janice. Yeah, I can just see one or two there coming through, but so far textiles and tobacco is being mentioned. Textiles is now kind of been taken forward to the majority, as well as that we've got a clear understanding of how EPR fees are being decided and recycling more generally. Just to tell everyone, this information is great for us to plan future webinars. Thanks to everyone for your responses. We might just hold for a few more seconds just to let the rest of them come through. But thank you very much. Back to you, Janice.
Super. Thanks very much, Lawrence. Very useful for us to take away. Oh, EU divergence in as well. That's useful to know. So I think everyone's finished typing there. So next slide then, please, Catherine. We'll go to the last slide. Thank you. So that's it for today. It just remains for me to say thank you for your attendance and all your questions and your input today. That's very much appreciated. And we hope to see you all again in future sessions. Thank you to the panelists for their absolutely first-class presentations, and special thanks to our facilitators, Catherine and Lawrence, for all the work they did there in the background before and during the event to make this event possible. So as a reminder, this event was recorded today, and the recording will be uploaded to the DAERA YouTube channel and our EPR webpage in due course. So it's goodbye from me now, and thank you for attending.